And we're back as we promised we would be.
I promised nothing.
Welcome to Say vs. Bourbon. As always, we're your hosts, Brandon and Steve, and today we are going to drink heavily and talk about fighting with weapons.
Yes, because, weapons are fun.
Yes, indeed. So I've opened up this bottle of Buffalo Trace that I still haven't managed to kill. Oh, it's a flavor, all right. It's actually not as bad as I remember it being from 2 weeks ago.
Does it still taste like bad decisions?
It does. It tastes exactly like Bad Decisions.
Me, I'm working on Little Maker's 46 at the moment, so everything should be fine.
But that doesn't taste like Bad Decisions at all.
Yes, because if I'm going to do this every couple of weeks, I'm going to have fun while I do.
No, Steven. They're not attracted to fun. Our audience is attracted to suffering.
Fair enough, sir. Fair enough.
So, yes, today we're fighting with weapons. I'm going to put some ice in this. Oh, God. Okay.
You do that. I'll vamp for a little bit.
Won't take but a second.
Fair enough. So, how's everybody doing out there, viewers? We're glad to be back, and we plan on having fun tonight. And as you can tell, I've just recently started drinking tonight, so haven't gotten to my usual rambling self just yet. Aside from that and everything else I'm using to describe it, this should be a fun episode as we dive into weapons in various aspects, both medieval and whatever else I can get Brandon off on various tangents.
I'm going to start with a tangent.
Ooh, tangents.
Because I realized something when I was thinking about this episode. I realized something that I really like when... Pardon me. Something I really like when fictional universes do it, right? I like when they actually think about the weapons they're using. Especially the made-up ones, right?
Right.
Like lightsabers. Lightsabers come to mind.
Go on.
Okay, so you look at a lightsaber, right? Everyone in Star Wars, the original trilogy is what I'm talking about here, by the way. The original trilogy, because the prequels are a travesty and the sequels are... I'll tell you what, we'll have an episode where we talk about that, because I feel like if I give my real opinion on the Star Wars sequels, I would probably be lynched by the entire internet.
Except for the people that share your opinions, of course.
I don't think anyone does.
Oh.
I think my opinion on the Star Wars prequels is unique. Or prequels. My opinion on the Star Wars sequels is unique.
This is why we're friends. We have interesting and unique perspectives on these things.
Yes. However, what I'm talking about here is lightsabers. And the reason I'm talking about lightsabers is because in the original trilogy, everyone's basically just fighting with it like it's a baseball bat, right? Because, well, one of the people is ancient, one of the people is a cyborg, and one of the people has never wielded a weapon before in his life, okay? So that's fine. That's reasonable.
I mean, aside from blasting Womp Rats in his T-16.
Yeah, but that's a little bit different from sword play.
Absolutely.
Right, so it's not egregious in the original trilogy. It's actually egregious in the prequels.
Where you have all the flipping and front flips for style and all that.
Front flips for style, yes, but that's kind of not what I'm talking. Okay, you're superhuman. You can put some, I don't know, superhuman agility behind something. It's okay, okay? Like, it's not something that a person should do when fighting with weapons, right? But it's okay if you have superpowers. It's one of those things.
Not like, front flipping with a fucking thunderhammer in Terminator armor.
We don't talk about that. Anyway, no. What I find egregious in the prequels is these wide, power swings that supposedly trained Jedi do out of nowhere for no reason. Because you got to think about it, right? Those big, wide power swings aren't even something you do with a real sword. When you look at the difference between, a real sword and a lightsaber, the lightsaber is way lighter, has a way different balance because it doesn't have a blade, and has a blade you can turn off.
I see where you're going with this, and I recently, I say recently, it was a couple of months ago, discovered how ineffective wide power swings can be when swinging around a weapon against another opponent.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Really? When?
Well, last time I came to visit, and we broke out the sparring.
Yeah. We had a good time, and that's why you don't do that. But
it is, and I can kind of chime in from a perspective of, I didn't grow up in, taking any martial arts training or anything like that. My only exposure to weaponry, by and large, was rule of cool that you see in every video game, anime, movie, things of that nature. But what I have, I do have experience with using sticks to hit things when growing up playing sports like baseball and golf, where it's really counterintuitive to what you would think. You don't have to swing really, really hard with a baseball bat to get the job done. You just have to be accurate with it because you're trying to hit something going, well, depending on your what you're doing, it's either going 60 miles an hour or 90, and you're trying to connect with this small object coming towards you with a relatively thin object, and it doesn't take a whole lot of force to do anything with it. And kind of similar with golf, you don't have to try to kill the ball to make it go far. You let the weight and physics do the work for you as it is coming from an elevated position down to striking the object. And I mean, sure, it's generating a lot of force, but that's simply because of the length of the club or the bat, and how you're having your body turn to address those.
Right. And that's kind of the point I'm getting at with the lightsaber, because there is no purpose to those big, heavy swings because you don't have any momentum whatsoever. It should be basically effortless to bat one of those swings away, right?
Yeah, you would absolutely, because at that point, all the force is directed at the handle of the lightsaber itself, that's where all the weight is, that's where the force is, and no pun intended.
Right, and that's why yes, don't look for females. Exactly right. Lightsabers should be using fencing technique. Now, where you're incorrect is they should not be using broadsword technique. That's not actually true, because it turns out broadsword technique also doesn't involve those big heavy swings people like to do.
A lot of swords, from what I've seen, outside of the ridiculously sized ones, or you get into things like claymores or other large two-handed swords, Zweihanders, which are heavier, but they're still balanced very, very well.
They're also not that heavy.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, just normal person can pick up just about any. It comes down to wrist strength.
Right, but they're still not that heavy. But the point I was trying to reach with the lightsaber, right, is that there is one way that I have seen that a person fights with a lightsaber that I looked at and was like, yes, you have actually thought through the properties of the weapon you're fighting with. And that was a lightsaber technique in the now defunct and no longer canon extended universe called Trakata, which was where, in the middle of a swing or in the middle of a block, you would shift your body and turn your lightsaber off. That would let your opponent's blade pass through yours, and then you could turn it back on, directly into their torso.
Essentially just the Jedi or Sith variant of nothing personal kid.
Not even that, because, again, all you're doing is bypassing their weapon because you're using the truly unique thing about a lightsaber. No other weapon, no other bladed weapon in fiction can turn the blade off.
Well, yeah, aside from everything that's, based off variants of the lightsabers and other franchises, which we'll touch on later.
They're all lightsabers, though.
Yes. Which I believe we've discussed before, and it's such an interesting concept. However, when it cuts to that point, I see why everything in the Star Wars Star Wars universe kind of has it with the, large swinging blades, because it just looks cool, which, by and large, everything involving weapon techniques in any kind of entertainment device is run off of rule of cool.
Well, but I'm going to argue with that, because in the original trilogy, they were fighting like an old man, a guy who doesn't have total control over his functions, and a kid who doesn't know how to fight. It made perfect sense.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. And then, they had their various styles that they generated from that, with Obi-Wan's being, like you said, an old man. Vader, essentially, his whole thing being, with their theory behind everything, there's weight behind these blows, just overpower the opponent because, hey, 95% of my body's cybernetic, I'm going to use all the strength I have at my disposal.
Right, which is completely reasonable when you are made of cybernetics. Remember, he's capable of lifting a fully grown human by the neck with one hand.
Yeah, which, that gets into a whole different conversation when you start factoring in the various force powers on display for anybody who uses, any Jedi or Sith who uses a lightsaber, because there are, and when it comes to the extended universe and anything involving canon, I consider everything canon until there's something that explicitly proves it wrong.
Right. And, it's most of the use of the Force you see in Star Wars is pretty much just flips, which is fine. It looks cool for the camera, sure. Do flips, it's okay. You have superpowers, use them, fine.
Which I think when it comes to... I didn't really play many of the Jedi Outcast games growing up. What I did play was a lot of... I played both of the Force Unleashed games, and that was a fun...
Although, wait... You know what I just realized? The idea of all the flips and so in real life, right? If you were going to do like a flip, and you wouldn't ever, but if you were to do like a flip, what would be the purpose of that? Why would you do it? The answer, you'd have to be doing it to trick your opponent somehow. To get in where he's not expecting an attack, or to, to suddenly move, right? So that you can attack where he's not defending himself. The problem with that is that these people can see the future. That is explicitly one of their abilities.
To varying degrees, but yeah, it just basically boils down to what it ends up being. It's not that their reaction time is infinitely better, it's because they see just enough ahead that it seems like the reaction time is infinitely better.
Right, but what that means is that those, tricksy maneuvers aren't going to be very effective when your opponent also has the Force. But you know what? That's actually forgivable, too. Because a Jedi hadn't fought a Force user in a long time. Right? Because the Old Republic was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
I mean, yeah, this is absolutely true, but then you factor in we're still talking about the original trilogy and not talking about the prequels or the sequels at this point.
I did just talk about the prequels, so you can mention the prequels if you want.
Well, I mean, in the case of the prequels, I mean, sure, they haven't had a massive uprising of, opposing Force users, but they still had to train against other Jedi who are Force users. And I'm sure that had, some things to go about. Surely not every single Jedi was just like, oh, you only need to learn lightsaber combat and how to do this thing with, do these things with your Force powers in a fight. I'm sure there's one master out there that was just absolutely throwing around his Padawan with Force pushes and things just because he could.
That's true. But again, that makes their whole fighting style in the prequels completely useless because they're aware that shit doesn't work against people who can see the future.
Right, but how many times do you see anybody other than the main characters fight somebody else with Force powers and a lightsaber?
I mean, never, but...
And looking at those characters, what do you have to go off of there?
You're not wrong. My thing about it is that I'm just trying to figure out, why would you do flips? And I realize that the answer to that is because it looks cool on camera, but I want there to be an in-universe explanation.
I mean...
there is almost, oh god, I'm about to say this sentence out loud, it's making me cry. There's almost an excuse when Yoda does it. Because Yoda's tiny. Yoda has to jump to attack you, pretty much. And he's gonna want to have his lightsaber every which way. Like, he wants it to be everywhere at once. He's just gonna come at you with it like a tiny little... He's gonna come at you like an angry cat, is what he's gonna do. That makes sense. It doesn't make sense for him to have a lightsaber, given everything we know about his character. It just... Like, that fight should have been the story of, like, Count Dooku being like, we will decide this with our mastery of the lightsaber, and Yoda being like, no, and then throwing him with the Force. Yoda's a wizard.
They're all wizards.
No. I mean trope-wise, right?
Yeah.
Like Obi-Wan and Vader are like old magic knights, right? But Palpatine and Yoda are wizards. They should not have lightsabers.
And in Yoda's case, very close to one of your favorite phrases. Lizard wizard.
Yeah, exactly. Yoda is literally a lizard wizard. That was probably my least favorite thing about the prequels, by the way.
Yoda being a lizard wizard?
No, Palpatine and Yoda having lightsabers. Doesn't make any sense.
I mean, it makes sense from an aspect that they always have a lightsaber, I suppose, but...
No, because in Return of the Jedi, Palpatine treated Luke's lightsaber like it was a toy. He didn't care about it. That wasn't a thing he did. He's a wizard. Why would he have a lightsaber?
To deal with Mace Windu.
He could have... No! He dealt with Mace Windu with Force lightning! Like a wizard! But, okay, this is not a Star Wars episode. We're just here to talk about lightsabers. And why everyone fights like an idiot with them. Actually, that puts me in mind of another really good example of, like, actually thinking through the capabilities of your weapon.
Yeah.
I read one of the Ciaphas Cain novels.
Ooh! Hero of the Imperium!
That's the one. That's the man. But I remember Cain narrating about chainsword dueling.
Actually, that brings up a good point, because I have a scene in one of my novels that has a scene of chainsword dueling.
That might be what I'm thinking of, actually.
I don't know if he was referring to the specific duel, but go ahead and tell yours. Go ahead and tell yours about Caiaphas Cain and his discussion change.
Okay, so anyway, like this is a very good example of actually thinking through your weapon's capabilities, right? Because according to Cain, according to the Caiaphas Cain novel, chainswords have a clutch and a throttle and a gearbox, basically. So they are capable of stopping, starting, and reversing. And one of the important things about chainsword dueling is picking exactly the right moment to reverse your chainsword's engine so that the teeth pull against your opponent's weapon to pull your weapon into your opponent.
Yep, very, very similar to the first Gaunt's Ghost novel. That it also had a scene involving a duel with chainswords. Very similar premise, but it actually goes through the duel and everything, and how it's slightly an outdated skill, and it takes a lot of fucking wrist strength to use one of these things because you're essentially swinging around a goddamn chainsaw.
Right, and they're not light.
They're not light.
We talked about how light a normal sword was, but these are not light. This is a chainsaw we're talking about. And yeah, adamantium is not that heavy in 40k lore, but it's still a gigantic fuck-off chainsaw. It's still got all of that motor inside of it.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's got the motor, and it's not only that. It's got the quote-unquote blade itself, where the chain runs around like a chainsaw. It's got a casing around it, usually, where you only have one side of the blade exposed at any given time, depending on the model of chainsword. Yes, there are multiples, and depending on who you're talking about, there are different classes. But by and large, the normal chainsword you're used to seeing only has the blade exposed. It's a one-edged weapon. You can bludgeon someone about the head with the opposite side. And so you've got a fairly significant casing around the blade, along with the blade itself. So that's, a weight there, probably in as much weight as a normal sword. Then you have the fact that you have the vibrations of this thing spinning around a, 2-foot fucking blade. So you have to deal with the vibrations of the blade. Then you have the motor and the gearbox and the fuel bowser and the fuel for this fucking thing, because it doesn't just run off, wishes and wishful thinking.
Right, and right. It runs on holy promethium or something. I don't know.
So you got all that. So you're essentially...
And while you're dealing with all that, you still have to work the clutch and the throttle like it's a chainsaw.
Exactly. And in the scene in the Gaunt's Ghost book, it sounds like it might have been him describing that scene, but I forget in terms of canon when they occur. And I don't know if Caiaphas Cain would actually know about Gaunt, but in Gaunt's Ghost,
there's one of two things that's happened here. Either this same scene happened in two different plot lines, which is entirely possible, or I'm remembering it incorrectly and it's from Gaunt's Ghost. One of the two.
Quite possibly. So the main character's dueling his uncle, essentially, because commissars, and he saw an injustice, and he was meting out the Emperor's justice, so on and so forth. And, you have this scene where it's described they're swinging these fuck-off huge chain swords around, and they're connecting and, repulsing from it. It's not this, flurry of, fancy, fencing. It's, you have to swing this thing like a fucking baseball bat almost.
You're in order to get real purchase, right? And, well, not only that, but it's also, again, really heavy, so you have to swing it that way. That's why it makes so much sense. And, okay, I want you to just imagine real quick the blade of a chainsaw hitting the blade of another chainsaw where they are both made of adamantium and will not break.
Incorrect. In the scene in question, it actually makes reference to the fact that if a chainsword is used in such a way for dueling and going up against another chainsword, it's also highly possible that the teeth of the chainswords will break off and fly everywhere.
Right. I'm just saying. I was just saying. I want you to imagine the force involved when those two chains collide and rev.
You either have situations where they connect and everything's just going so quickly they just kind of hit and glance off, or if you get very unlucky or lucky, you lock in, and then that's when the chains stop. The motors lock up, and then you have to deal with the throttle and the choke and reversing the blade, and that's where you get your mention of.
I think this is literally the scene I was talking about. I think I was just confused about which series it was from.
Fair enough, but it's like you said, it makes reference to the capabilities of these weapons. You're not going to take an Imperial chainsaw and chainsword and be fencing with the damn thing.
An Eldar chainsword, on the other hand.
Then there are some references to, if you look at it, monocutter blades, or which are essentially just very small chainswords.
I thought mono blades were like just really sharp.
Maybe I'm thinking of vibro blades.
Are vibro?
There's a mention of something. There is a mention in, I believe it is Necropolis, so third book in the God's Ghost series. Or there's a small. It's not called a chain weapon, but it functions very similar to a chain weapon. Or maybe it is. I'm just remembering wrong. But it's essentially just a very, very small version of chainsword with a small battery controlling it. So it's not going to, be used for much more than, cutting a few small things here and there.
I don't know why you wouldn't just use a knife at that point, though.
Because a knife's not going to cut through a chain link fence, and they needed something that would cut through a chain link fence for the scene.
Fair enough.
Once again, rule of cool wins out.
But yeah, that's the kind of shit I like. I like it when they actually think through the capabilities of the thing they're using.
Absolutely. And just to stay on 40K, there's also cases of some of everyone's favorite weapons, the power swords and power.
Right, but those are just swords.
Well, there is, they're swords wrapped around a highly, destructive energy, but there are also references to ancient patterns of these power weapons that essentially function like lightsabers.
Oh yeah, like lightsabers were a thing that they had a long time ago.
Like they were a thing they had a long time ago, but instead of being the small spindly blades, they're just these have these fuck off huge plasma blades they're swinging around.
Oh, the kittens have lightsabers.
Indeed. But we're still on 40K for the moment. We could probably talk about one of the more destructive forms of melee weapons that you have I've seen in.
Actually, I want to make a quick point about the chainsword that I just remembered, or that I just realized. I just realized it in my head. That back casing that's keeping the chainsaw away from you, basically on your side. I just realized what that's for. It's so you can put your hand on it and push.
Yep.
Ah, God, I love half sorting. Why doesn't every fantasy universe why doesn't every fantasy work, rather? Wait, why doesn't every fictional work just use half sorting? Half sorting is great.
Because a lot of the fictional works out there use lightsabers where it's impossible.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Game of Thrones
and the like. I've seen half sorting in Game of Thrones.
Actually, so have I. But you know what? Actually, go ahead and let's talk about your subject. Talk about the subject you were talking about. But you just said D&D, and I want to address that later on. So keep a mental note of that, and we'll address that.
That'll probably take about 45 minutes.
Keep a mental note of that, and talk about. You said something truly destructive for 40. Oh, are we about to talk about power fists?
Oh, well, yeah, we can talk about power fists, but just to keep on the topic of swords, force weapons.
Yeah, but
I'm talking pre-8th ed force weapons, where you swing and bitches die.
Yeah, I know that's what you're talking about, but my concern with it is... What am I going for here? Let me think about this. My issue with it, right, is that in terms of like your combat, that's basically just precisely a power sword. The only difference is it will kill you instantly.
Right, but the concept behind it, where you have these weapons that are specifically designed to channel the, psychic energy of psychers, and then using it when they connect to just, gimp people, instantly give them into tiny little people. I mean, sure, it's shown up in other places, but it seems like if you had a situation with the Jedi where if they made contact with a lightsaber against another Jedi and they didn't get a full-on hit, they just hit and then they can channel their force power through it and make the other guy explode. Brandon?
I'm sorry. Go ahead and repeat that, because I didn't actually hear you.
Well, essentially I was getting at the concept behind them where, yes, as Phoebe says in the chat, I wave my sword in your general direction, ludicrous jibs. Where if you take the concept of a Force Blade and apply it to something like the Star Wars universe, where if you're dueling another Force user with a lightsaber, you don't have to get a full-on cut that can kill them. You make enough contact and they die. Because you make them explode.
Right, yes, true. But I mean, that's still kind of what a power sword does, just more.
Fair enough. I mean, I guess at this point, since you took the wind out of my sails, we can talk about Power Fist and Thunder Hand.
Wait. How did I take the wind out of your sails?
I thought I had a good point. I see I was wrong.
My apologies.
No worries. So, Power Fists.
Yes, let's begin the Imperial Fisting.
For those unfamiliar with the concept, a Power Fist is essentially a fuck-off huge gauntlet, and it is wrapped in a field of energy that just makes things not happy anymore.
Yes. Well known for their ability to punch out entire trenches. And tanks. And fighter jets.
And the occasional fighter jet and the small Titan. If the angry Marines are to be believed.
Oh no, I have punched out a fighter jet.
So have I, but then again, I was using a Riptide.
That is a slightly different thing.
So essentially, a Power Fist works on the same principle as a Power Sword. It's a weapon that is sheathed in a disruptive energy force. But it just does it to the nth degree, because when you hit something with it, it just kind of releases it all. You end up being Fist of the North Star on everybody you come across.
Right, and then there's the chain fist variant, which is the same thing, but with a fuck-off huge chainsaw bolted to it. 40k, you're ridiculous.
Or you have Lightning Claws, which is the same concept, except you're Wolverine! Just slicing and dicing and being the best you are at what you do, running through the enemy lines with electrified claws of adamantine.
Yeah. Actually, okay, so claws, right? Claws are something that I haven't really put a lot of thought into, like how you're actually supposed to fight with those. But now that I think about it, they seem kind of bad.
Well, I mean, there's not much you can do. They are purely an offensive weapon, unless, they're the Lightning Claw variant and you have enough armor wrapped around the fist you're using.
Right. But it's not even that. It's like, okay, so wedge action, right? Like your sharp cutting action, right? That involves force over area, right?
Usually, yeah.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, based on force over area, Wolverine should just have one claw in the middle.
I get what you're saying with this. In the more claws you have in the weapon, it seems like it would do less damage because the force is spread over a larger, or not a larger area, but multiple points.
Well,
so
if you achieve penetration, Vow Chicka Bow Wow, if you achieve penetration, you're going to do a whole shitload of damage, right? But your chance of actually achieving penetration in the first place goes down.
Right.
So yeah, Wolverine should just have one claw, and Lightning Claw should just be a sword.
Which brings us right back around to Power Sword.
Yeah, only with lightning. Lightning sword.
Lightning Sword.
Lightning sword.
I want to say I've seen somewhere that has a lightning sword, but I can't remember the source.
Yeah, me neither.
Should we talk about other variations of weapons? Because
I would like to.
Huh?
I would like to, but like, we're talking about melee weapons right now, and I am like.
Oh no, I'm more than happy to talk about melee weapons. I'm just making reference to an article I wrote that will probably never see the light of.
Oh, actually, go ahead and reference that. Yeah.
So a while back, I wrote an article and wasn't terribly happy with it. It's somewhere. I'm not going to bother trying to look for it for the sake of this. But it essentially came around with the writing prompt of what are some viable alternatives to the sword in fantasy, or just fiction in general. And due to discussions I had with Brandon and mutual friends of ours, and just my own research, I kind of discovered that there's really not anything that's better than a sword for most things, just as a generalized weapon.
Oh no, that's just not. That's incorrect.
Well, I mean, like, in a one-on-one fight, what are you going to take?
A spear.
Okay, spear. You have the haft of the weapon that you can hit with, and you have the point of the weapon you can kill.
Right. More importantly, though, right, the reason the spear is probably superior as a dueling weapon is that I can poke you while you're over there.
What do you do if you miss your stab?
You back up and try again. That's how spears work.
Right, they're rushing you.
Yeah, you keep poking. You keep poking till you get a hit.
Yeah, so you got your two hands on that spear?
Yes, it's a spear.
Okay. So in Giant Light, you're going to use both hands. So you're a sword wielder, assuming they're not dual wielding, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
No. We're gonna be the one show about sword wielding that doesn't bitch about dual wielding.
Or assuming they don't have anything in their free hand. And they're not going to take the spear away from you, but they can grab onto the fucker.
Yeah, they can. I can grab onto their sword arm. It's a risk you take when you're fighting with a melee weapon. My point is that if I have a sword and you have a spear, I don't really want to approach you, because if I approach you, you're going to poke me with the spear. And I don't want to be poked.
Maybe it was a point of just how much alcohol we consume when we hang out together, but I want to say the conversation went a different way. But that's entirely possible that I'm remembering everything wrong.
Yeah, I definitely trust my chances with a spear way more than with a sword, especially since I'm barely trained, right? So the nice thing about a spear is it's actually like super easy. You just poke. You can put your whole body behind it, and it's like real easy. You shift at the hip, and I'm doing it in my chair right now, just like that. It's cake. It's easy.
Which is why when you look at any historical army, or by and large most starting entry level units and RTSs of the type, you're going to see some variant of spear with possibly a shield or a pike, something along those lines, because they're easy to make a lot of them fairly quickly and give them to guys and tell them to stab the other guys.
Actually, you know what? That brings... I mean, okay, so yes, that is absolutely true. But the other thing about spears is that they're way more effective in formation fighting, and you don't see formation fighting all that often in... Well, okay, you do, I guess, when there's like a big battle scene or whatever. But anyway, they're especially useful in formation fighting where you can just have a wall of spears in a place and they can't get past it. But I find it weird in some, like... The examples I'm going to mention are like Warhammer Fantasy and D&D.
All right, let's go.
In both of those universes, there is melee weapons and there is formation fighting. Generally in the case of D&D. I know there's not one singular D&D.
Well, I mean, you have the formation fighting and the generalized stuff as the, par for the course fighting between armies in D&D, but, by and large, it's going to be small group actions, which we've covered in a previous podcast.
That is true. We did cover small unit tactics. But, okay, here's my problem with that.
The armies of the land.
Here's my problem with that. The reason formation fighting went out of style in real life is because artillery.
Guns.
Artillery. You know what?
There's a reason why one of the most effective strategies for playing Imperial Guard in 40k is to just have a fuck ton of guardsmen protecting a fuck ton of basilisks.
Well, right, I realize. But, like, D&D and Warhammer Fantasy both have wizards in them who are approximately as effective, like even a mid-range wizard, approximately as effective as a howitzer.
And depending on point cost, you can bring several.
Right, and your standard player wizard, your like level 5 wizard in D&D, has access to Fireball. Do you have any idea how many level 1 warriors a Fireball kills if they're clustered in a formation?
A shit ton. Do wizards get Fireball as early as level 5, though?
Yes. Level 5 is the first level they get 3rd level spells.
I mean, let's also go, and you don't even have to... I think
I'm actually wrong about that. Hang on, let me look this up. I'm going to Pathfinder SRD up in this bitch.
That's what I'm doing right this very second. But, by and large, while you're looking that up, before you even take into account Fireball, before that point, they have things like Flaming Hand.
Right, although that's not the kind of formation-disrupting explosion I'm talking about here.
I argue to say that if you have a group of level 1 warriors advancing towards a wizard, and he sets a bunch of them bitches on fire.
A couple of them bitches on fire. It's not that big. But...
I mean, it goes up to...
No, I was right. I'm looking right at it. 5th level, they have access to Fireball.
Fireball, very good. But Fireball is an amazing spell, but wizards also have just a slew of hilarious things they can throw at formations, like Chain Lightning, or some of the
Chain Lightning is a much higher level spell.
True. But, if you have a high enough level wizard, there's no need to send a squad of warriors after them. You need to attack them with, something else. Perhaps one of my favorite classes, just have a rogue sneak up on him and sneak attack, bitch.
Okay, that's a thing that doesn't work very well against a formation. That's for sure.
Oh no, and I've discovered that the hard way many a time.
Yeah. Them storm vermin patrols. Wait, no, you don't have vermin, right?
But going to the Warhammer Fantasy side of things, it's not only wizards. There's a lot of shit in that fucking world that is just, ridiculous. You have your, the fact that you have, handgunners that, don't give a fuck about armor or shields. Or, cannon.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that, like, formation tactics do not have any place in D&D or Warhammer Fantasy for the same reason in both, because it is very, very easy to get your entire formation fireballed in both universes.
It's entirely, possible to just run across, or not run across, but not even getting to the fucking fight, but end up in a situation where you're ambushed by a bunch of fucking Skaven sharpshooters with Jezza.
Yeah, for example.
Jezziles do not give a fuck, especially when they're firing Warpstone.
That is a true fact.
Or, Rattling Gunners. So for those not familiar for what I'm referencing, I want you to imagine a rat, and then make the rat the size as tall as an NBA player, but as fucking proportionally as large as an NFL linebacker, and give them a minigun that fires toxic stones. Have fun!
And then put that character in a fantasy universe where most people are fighting with halberds.
Or, the occasional single-shot pistols, which are... So, alright, so here's one of my minor gripes about the Warhammer Fantasy.
That it has both single-shot pistols and steam tanks?
No, that's par for the course, and I find that absolutely logical in this setting. My concern is just how fucking destructive they make those single-shot pistols. They make them fucking fire like every time in the various books I've read. Granted, they've been, most of the time they've been used against, undead or other things, gibbering horrors from hell, and granted, I'm familiar with how large a slug you can load into a muzzle-loaded weapon. I used to, hunt with a muzzle-loader years and years ago. Believe it was... I can't remember what the caliber of it was, but it was a fairly significant size. And I've hit targets with this shell, or this slug, and seen what it does. But then you compare it to what they say in the novels for a similar sized weapon, and it says, oh, it like blew off his fucking arm, or his head's gone now.
I mean, I'm willing to forgive that, really. Because, it's super cool.
Just have a witch hunter run up with a, gun sword.
But my problem with Warhammer Fantasy is just specifically that there is literally no reason that universe would have formation tactics in it at all.
I mean, there was no reason that we had formation tactics, and, well, yeah, I suppose there were. Looking back at the American Revolution, granted, we're still in a time frame where muzzle-loaded weaponry and stuff, but it's getting to... I'm sorry, not that. The Civil War. There was no reason to have formation tactics in the Civil War other than the fact that, oh, yeah, this is how everyone is fighting their wars with these rifled weapons at this time.
Yeah, that's true. But in such a war-torn universe, somebody would probably have realized their mistake by now.
Well, I mean, if you look at the most successful races in Warhammer Fantasy, or Warhammer in general, or Warhammer Fantasy in particular, it's the races that don't really do the formation fighting.
That's not true. The Empire's super effective.
The Empire's super effective because they also have artillery to back up their formations.
Right.
And they have handgunners to back up their formations. They use mixed unit tactics, which we discussed, are highly effective. But they still have,
less effective when you're using both artillery and melee combatants, but
True, but I mean, it's also a situation where they, have blocks of infantry advancing on that target, being 6 foot tall, angry motherfuckers who only live for fighting in the form of, chaos marauders or chaos warriors or
dark elves or
right, and
vampires
you have the
or
as successful as the empire is. I mean, they are still just they are limited to their area of their kingdom. Then you start looking at the things like the fucking lizardmen and Skaven and orcs.
Right, but Warhammer okay, look, the tabletop game of Warhammer Fantasy Battles involves formation fighting. It is a thing that you do in that game.
I understand. I was getting away from that, I suppose, and going into the actual lore of the universe.
Right. Ooh, yeah. Back on the subject of wizards, they actually they have way more abilities than just fireball, but right. That's what I'm saying. Wizards in particular make formation fighting useless. Everyone should. I honestly think that it makes the most sense in D&D. Okay, in D&D, I honestly feel like it would make the most sense to literally split your armies into mixed units. All armies are adventure parties. Yes, exactly.
Yep, I would agree. I mean, adventurer parties in general just have that fantastic reputation of being murder hobos in general. Then you have an army of murder hobos.
Right, but I'm talking about it tactically. Tactically, you do what our army does and split them into squads.
I'm going to think something. I actually remembered something. It's not exactly D&D, but it kind of proves your point to an extent. If you look at how the adventurer army is set up in Log Horizon.
Go delve deeper into that.
So, by and large, in Log Horizon, which is an anime that I recommend everybody who hasn't seen it watch because it's infinitely better than Sword Art Online. Maybe not as good at some points as Dot Hack, but it's highly worth a watch. It probably fits the description of what would happen if everybody was transported to a MMO a lot better than anything else. When they have their adventure parties and their guilds and so on and so forth. It's your typical. Then you end up in a situation where there's a call to mobilize an army. Well, when they mobilize said army, they have their frontline fighters. They break up into parties, but then each party is commanded by somebody who commands a line of that just Overwatch, and it just goes up and up the chain of command. So you from the top down with communication and so on and so forth, like you would in a modern army, but it's all magic and sword and board. So you have your frontline fighters taking the brunt of the attack, and then you have their supporting mages and clerics and healers who are there for set up aid stations and so on and so forth. And I think that's a good example of what you're trying to say here with adventuring parties.
It actually is. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say, because that's the reason that in real life we split into squads, because when you group up, you get howitzered.
When you group up, you have access to a unit of people carrying around mortars.
Right.
You have to, if you have a couple of squads together, those squads are at least going to have one or two people in each of those squads that has a squad automatic weapon of some sort.
Saws.
Yes. Daka.
Although in this case, instead of a saw, you have a wizard.
And instead of having to deal with, corpsmen or medics, you have people who can cast spells and make you feel better.
Exactly. I'm saying that that's exactly the way you would do battle. If you had these abilities at your disposal.
Absolutely. Which brings me to another point, a slightly different series. And not to be confused with one of your favorite series. The series Gate.
Right. Gate.
Gate's interesting because it has a fantasy style universe come in contact with modern Japan. with its modern self-defense force,
And
with
get
its modern
completely wrecked.
They got so fucked. But, I mean, they're sitting there trying to, fight in unit tactics, or fight in, traditional tactics, and then suddenly, they run into a kill box that has been, pre-sighted in by artillery and heavy gun emplacements and tanks.
Yeah.
And Apache attack helicopters.
Yeah.
And Harriers.
Yep, and that's why you don't use formation tactics when your opponent has artillery.
Yes, artillery.
Fix bayonets, but don't stop the artillery.
All right, Commissar Brandon.
Now that's my Krieger persona, is what that is.
I don't think he'd say nearly as many words. I literally think the command for a Krieger commander would just be fix bayonets, with the understanding that the artillery is going to continue firing.
No, see, because the artillery in this hypothetical is not Krieg. So he has to tell them to keep shooting.
Fair.
Ah.
I want to say I read somewhere that the only purpose commissars serve with Krieg units is just to prevent them from absolutely going on suicide missions all the time and waste.
Yeah, it's exactly the same as the actual purpose of an orc war boss. It's to prevent the boys from charging too soon.
Oh boy.
Have you ever noticed that we can never not talk about 40K?
I mean, I don't think there's ever a situation where we're never not going to talk about 40K. I think our viewers are just going to have to accept the fact that it's going to just weasel its way in. It's either going to slip in like a plague of Nurgle or just, pop out of nowhere, or it's going to slip in like a plague of Nurgle or just, bash down the fucking door like corn.
Yeah, or it's going to just suddenly mutate. I can't think of a good one for Slaanesh.
It's going to suddenly mutate from a conversation about generic weapons and, unit tactics into a conversation of Warhammer or 40K.
Every time.
And we don't talk of Slaanesh.
I do.
I mean, we do, but you really want to discuss how Slaanesh could just suddenly make it, how our 40K discussions can show up like Slaanesh?
Yeah, I really don't, actually. I don't want to do that at all.
Baby, we know Slaanesh is your patron deity. Just like mine is Nurgle. Anyway.
It's funny because he had diseases.
Alright, Brandon. Theoretical weapons testing now. Well, not theoretical weapons testing. Let's just take some stuff together. I know how much of a fan you are of the Roman legions.
Sure.
Can you think of any exact battles in history where they came across a Norseman's shield wall?
Well, no, because they predated that by like 800 years.
Exactly. So, which do you think is a more terrifying thing to come up against? A shield wall of Norsemen or a squad of legionnaires?
It's the Legion. It's always the Legion. Here's the thing, man. The Legions were, See, the Legions didn't just murder you. They murdered you efficiently.
Yeah, I get that. But I'm just going back to the...
functionally, the shield wall and the Legion are very, very similar. I'm just saying that in terms of, like, discipline and formation tactics, I think the Romans have it.
But What about that legion that vanished in Scotland?
It is sometimes the legions are commanded by morons. It's a thing that happens to every army.
All right, so let's. Oh no, we should probably do just an entire episode of theory crafting.
We should have a next episode will be who wins in a fight. We'll take viewer suggestions.
Oh, I love it already.
Okay, so suggestions are now open for next episode, where we will talk about who wins in a fight.
And if you do not provide us with anything, we will just pester you for answers until we get them.
Yes.
All right, so we've covered sword.
We've covered a lot of melee weapons, turns out.
Well, no, I was going to bring back combat situations, much in line with the article that never occurred. Axes.
Axes?
Shield and axe versus a swordsman.
Well, I mean, having a shield already makes it,
Well, I mean, swords are going to have a shield.
Fair enough. Well, so Fire Emblem tells me that swords beat axes.
Life experience.
Life experience tells me, well, swords probably beat axes. It just kind of depends. Like, things that it's hard to do against an axe. Block. Things that it's fairly easy to do against an axe. Dodge. So it all just kind of depends.
I suppose. We were going to talk about D&D. Did we cover what you want to talk about D&D? Or we could talk about various, actual weapons in D&D.
I actually kind of wanted to talk about how, like, turn-based combat is, like, way less accurate than you actually give it credit for.
Ooh.
Like, it's already super inaccurate, right? Because obviously you don't attack in turns. But like, it's actually even worse than that. Like, if I was trying to develop like a semi-realistic turn-based melee combat system, it would basically all only be grappling rules all the time.
All right, so based upon that, how about a system similar to how they do the X-Wing tabletop game, where both sides lay in their moves and then it kind of generates based.
Well, the problem with that is that that's really not how it works either.
Actually, I want to say I've seen a game that kind of does something like that.
You have. It's Old World of Darkness.
Oh no, like in an actual video game.
Maybe. Hang on. I'm going to mention this real quick. Don't Look for Phoebe says, why not choosing a weapon that suits your character and the flavor thereof? You know what? Yes, we will discuss that in a minute.
I'm so excited. Also, on to drink number 2.
Oh, I'm still on drink number 1. It tastes like a Buffalo Trace.
That should just be their fucking advertising line. Buffalo Trace. It tastes like a Buffalo Trace.
I'm not sure that it has an advertising line anymore because I bought this on like mega clearance and I think they might be out of business.
I wonder why.
You know, it's really not that bad. I'm just not a bourbon drinker.
You wuss.
I like scotch.
And I like bourbon. It's amazing we get along as well as we do.
Those are both whiskeys. It's fine.
Meanwhile, when I tell other people I drink a lot of bourbon, they just look at me like, oh, how are you still alive?
And the answer is I'm not.
I'm not. I've been dead inside for years.
Yep, there it is.
We were talking about something before we got sidetracked.
We were talking about something. What was it? Was it this thing that's in our chat window right now?
We were talking about how you were going to develop a possible thing for a turn-based fighting.
Right. Because if I was going to do that, it'd basically all be grappling rules. Because when you think about it, right, that's kind of most of what melee combat actually is. Because, like, okay, the way D&D works, okay, the way turn-based combat works is I swing at you, and something happens, and then you swing at me, and something happens. But that's not what happens. That's not how that works. What happens is that I swing at you, and you do something, and then shit happens.
I actually have a solution for your conundrum. If you're so inclined to listen.
You have my undivided attention because we're doing a podcast.
So, looking at it from that perspective, I mean, granted, that's not how it works in terms of character. But when you have to roll against the opponent's AC, if you miss, what's saying that it's not because they blocked your attack with their...
No, it is because they blocked your attack, right? But, like...
You're saying there's not enough decision-making from both sides?
Kinda, yeah. It's awfully gamey. But, I mean, it's gonna be, I guess. I might be complaining about nothing here, I'm not sure.
Fair. So how would you do it?
I wouldn't. I would never design a combat system.
Aside from the fact that we've designed combat systems before.
No, I wouldn't because I'm not sure if it's actually possible. But I would want each attack to have a lasting effect, whether it hits or misses.
It does in World of Darkness.
Exactly, something like that. I mean, that's a very simplistic one, but, you know, even that's not bad, because what he's referencing is, in New World of Darkness, each attack against you reduces your defense against all further attacks in the round. So if you're being attacked by two different people, then you're going to be less effective against one of them, because you're trying to protect yourself from the other one.
Well, I mean, it's that and the fact that as you take damage, you become less effective.
That's also true. But what I'm saying is that combat maneuvers, if I were designing it, it'd end up being really complex and no one would play it. But if I were designing it, then combat maneuvers would have lasting effects. Like a straight cut would reduce... What am I thinking of here? Like a straight cut would reduce your ability to attack back. Because you're focused on blocking that.
What it sounds like you're wanting to do is to mix a little bit of New World of Darkness with the damage system from Battle.
But I'm not talking about damage here. Because I'm talking about combat maneuvers that would have an effect whether it hit you or not.
Ah.
Like, and you have a little bit of experience with this. If I just throw a straight diagonal cut at you, you cannot then attack me. You have to deal with that first.
Despite what everything says, dodging is not very easily in that fucking scenario.
Exactly. Like, and there's no chance that I'm going to miss you, so obviously you've had to block or parry somehow.
Block or parry or completely disengage by backing outside of reach, in which case I can't do anything. I have to regain position.
Right, that's what I'm saying. And that's something that doesn't happen in turn-based strategy because, you know, I swing at you and you either take damage or don't, and then you take your turn as though I never swung at you.
God damn it, I want to say I've played a game that had a system like this, but I can't remember what the fuck it was.
Watch it be Dark Heresy.
Maybe. Holy shit, it got windy all of a sudden. But yeah, I see what you're saying there, where you basically have to take it. Maybe I'm confusing it with how it works with games like For Honor or the actual version of the fighting system from fucking Mountain Blade.
Ah, Mountain Blade.
Where it does not matter what weapon you're using, there's a way you can block with everything.
True. Well, kind of hard to block a lance charge, but you can.
Yeah, you just break your fucking shield.
And your arm, and your horse.
Or, you get knocked the fuck over.
Right.
And
Yep.
I hit the wrong button.
I thought somebody joined us for a second. I was looking to see what the fuck happened. Anyway, should we dive into Phoebe's?
Yeah. Let's do that. Let's do that real quick because that sounds like fun. So, when I'm thinking of a weapon for a character, I usually base it on I don't base it on anything thematic generally. I just try to base it on the character's like physical traits, right? Like Levicar from Ringward. He's kind of a scrawny little like academic type who really prefers not to fight anybody if it's at all possible to not fight anybody. So it just seemed, he is a nerd, it just seemed perfectly logical that he should, if he's forced to fight somebody, just use a spear. Because he doesn't have very much training, he doesn't want to be anywhere near his opponent, and, well, it's good for playing keep away. So it seems like the right thing for him to do is just, pick up a long spear and poke at somebody while backing up.
Imagine if it was in a world where gunpowder was a thing, he would use a pistol of some sort.
I mean, his actual primary weapon's a crossbow, but we're focusing on the melee weapon here.
For the moment, at least.
Point is, actually, because I completely forgot that I was actually focusing on melee weapons, but actually, every time he's ever had to fight somebody, he has shot them with a crossbow, now that I think about it.
Which is the correct response. If you can kill somebody from, a distance, kill them from a distance.
Right, but because, again, we're dealing with a scrawny little nerd here who is not at all a type of person who should be in frontline engagements. He should never be there to begin with. If he's there, something has already gone wrong.
And I'm sure some of you might be thinking, well, why doesn't he use a bow of some sort? Well, he's a scrawny little nerd, and it takes a significant amount of strength to draw a bow that isn't some form of modern recurve or
compound.
Compound, yeah.
Right, if it's not a modern compound bow, it's actually really heavy trying to pull that string back. And the other nice thing about a crossbow is that, you point and you shoot, and then you pull a lever. It's pretty easy.
Oh, absolutely. From somebody who's actually shot bows before, I've shot, modern compounds. But even then, they're not, you have to be able to pull these fuckers back. They, start out at like 50-pound draw length and then go up.
They're also harder to aim than a crossbow.
That's a matter of perspective.
Yeah, the perspective of being just to the left of the arrow as opposed to above it.
So we've talked about Levicar. How about Nox and his choice?
His choice of weapon is kind of interesting, actually. Okay, so Nox is a character who has a very specific superpower. And his very specific superpower is the ability to move as though he were on the moon. What I mean is, gravity doesn't affect him as much as it affects other people. To that end, he has his Zweihander. And the reason he has his Zweihander is because he effectively weighs. Hang on, I've got it written down somewhere. He effectively weighs about 30 pounds. His sword weighs about 5 pounds. And the reason for that is to create retarded amounts of momentum and just basically beat people down. In addition, he also is completely capable of throwing himself around with the momentum of his sword.
Which kind of ties back into why you would never jump in combat. Nox doesn't give a fuck.
Right. Nox will absolutely jump in combat because he weighs little enough that if, while he is in the air, you swing at him and he blocks it, that action will carry him further into the air.
Fighting Nox is like fighting an anime character.
It is literally almost exactly like that, yes. And yes, he will occasionally get a forehead to the nose because, well, he has exactly one superpower. And that is not getting hit in the face. But yeah, that's... So again, it wasn't a thematic choice. I don't generally make thematic choices on weapon loadouts. I just base it on the character's physical traits and potential superpowers.
Fair enough. I guess at this point I should reveal my two before we dive into how and you would make this.
Was that English?
Maybe. I think I rolled a 1. Anyway. I have two characters in the same setting. One that's more well known and one that sprung up briefly, and I'm probably going to have to find all this stuff and bring him back. One of them was a cavalry officer for one of the nations in the world we're talking about, and his whole shtick was, if he was on a horse, he would charge you with a spear or light lance of some sort, and if he was on foot, he has a sword, so on and so forth. That's strictly based upon the fact of how he was built as just being a noble officer of his nation's military.
A cavalry sergeant.
Cavalry sergeant or lieutenant, however you want to look at it. I mean, there's not much else you can really go for there beyond the fact, like, all right, well, this guy does this job. What would be the weapons he would be trained?
Right, because he's using them in an actual sanctioned, military setting.
Then I have my other character, Pax. Pax is interesting in that he's similar to Nox in that he has a very specific superpower. His superpower, however, does not allow him any just direct offensive uses of his power. Pax's entire shtick is he can make things silent. Just, he can silent an area or he can make somebody silent and he moves silently.
Right, and then he pops up behind you and says nothing personnel, and then he stabs you with his knives because he has knives.
He does have knives, but that's based more on, again, looking at this character and how he's set up. Which is how he was set up, was he would essentially be a steward or a valet for whoever he was. He was trained to understand how things worked around courts and nobles and how to interact and just serve as a servant, a Jeeves, if you would. But Alfred. He was also an Alfred. But he was also trained to be a bodyguard for whoever he was serving. And it's kind of difficult to be an unobtrusive servant while carrying around a fuck-off-huge sword. So primarily he would have, a couple of knives hidden under hidden away. But he also would be, because he can, silence things and move silently and is, damn good at being sneaky and shit, he'd also train in, swords and shorter weapons in case he actually ended up in a fight. He could, fight his way out better than he could with knives, because if you get caught by guards, having a couple of daggers is not going to do you a whole lot of good against their fucking swords and shields and armor.
Right.
So essentially, he was, primarily he prefers, shorter swords, maybe the occasional rapier, things of that nature, things that he can use, fairly effectively and maintain movement and keep it, because he's not made to be in a stand-up fight.
Oh,
I mean,
on that subject, I'm going to mention a pro tip really quick. Okay, swords are straight garbage against armor. Your best bet is to turn the sword around and bludgeon them in the head with the handle.
Yep. Or to gain distance and not fight them.
Obviously not fighting them would be your first choice, but we're well beyond that now. We're talking about fighting with weapons, not running with weapons.
Right. I mean, granted, he was trained in other styles, so if he had to, he could pick up a spear and use a spear or an axe or what have you. But
right, but if a child had to use a spear, he could pick up a spear and use a spear. That's why they're so popular.
Right. So again, it came less from a perspective of Brandon's choices, more from a thematic choice for the character. So really it comes down to, when you're choosing a weapon for a character, what weapon would suit that character, it would come down to a little bit of basing it around what they're physically capable of, but also what thematically fits them.
Well, I happen to think that choosing a weapon based on their physical capabilities seems to generally end up choosing a good thematic weapon.
It can, yeah.
Like, Levicar being the kind of pragmatist who is just going to shoot you with a crossbow and not even bother with the whole physical combat thing. Makes perfect sense thematically, but it makes perfect sense thematically because it makes perfect sense physically. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we're trying to say is, choose something that you think would work for your character and go from there. There's nothing we can tell you that's going to change your...
Or just pick the coolest possible option and give your character the ability to teleport.
So give them a scythe that can transform into a sniper rifle.
Yes. A scythe that turns into a sniper rifle. That's a Ruby reference, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
God, I never realized all of the similarities the Ruby cast has to bad RP characters.
It doesn't require teleportation, VB. However, the character is capable of moving at high speeds while turning into a cloud of rose petals.
God.
It does seem like bad RP, but it's a fun watch. I recommend anybody who hasn't watched Ruby should watch it, because it's fun. Shotgun gloves are cool ass. So is essentially a handgun that transforms into a Kasarigama, or a rapier that has a revolver chamber in it that has just concentrated magic that you can use to perform.
There are 40 videos on the internet about why gun swords are a shitty idea, so I'm not going to mention it again.
No, it's just a straight up sword. It's just, it has a chamber in it that allows the character to channel the magic of the universe. It doesn't shoot anything. It's just a way to channel.
Oh my god, these really are just shitty roleplay characters. How is Ruby so good?
It's strictly rule of cool, and the creator was a genius and a saint.
True. Pistol rapiers do exist in Bloodborne.
Pistol rapiers do exist in Vermintide.
That's not a pistol rapier. It's a pistol and a rapier. Like he's got one in each hand.
I could have sworn in Vermintide 1 he had a pistol in one hand, a rapier in the other, and the rapier was also a pistol.
Oh, fuck, it might have been.
I mean, also, Brandon, as you said, shitty RP character is, you look at anime protagonists, and by and large, they're just shitty RP characters.
I will have you know, okay, that while that is true, and while Naruto is not a great series, I did appreciate that his sole talent in life was a thing I have never seen in RP before, which is creating a clone army of himself. I have seen it in X-Men, but not in roleplay.
I mean, it could be worse. They could have, a cell phone that allows them to travel through time.
Is that a Steins Gate reference?
Odin Koma!
They couldn't travel through time. They could send text messages to the past. That's not a weapon either.
I know, but I want to make a Steins Gate reference.
I'll show you a reference.
Uh-oh.
No, I won't.
Think of a trouble, boys.
I have no idea what I was going to say. Oh, I will mention the dumbest weapon I've ever seen in an anime, though.
Go ahead.
It's the whip chain sword thing that like Ivy has in Soul Calibur. Dumbest weapon I've ever seen.
All right, so going back into D&D, in 3.5 there was an amazing weapon. It had reach. You could use it to trip with, and it did a significant amount of damage. And you could use it for dex to damage because lol.
Wait, are you talking about the chain whip?
The chain whip, which is just Ivy's sword.
Yeah, about that. What bothered me about it was a reach weapon that did decent damage, but also didn't have to be a reach weapon.
Absolutely. The dumbest weapon is an ogre dual-wielding orcs. On either side of a spike chain, their IQ is lower. You mentioned that, but Giant of the Playground with, God, what's the name of that?
Oh, yeah, that reach chain wielding half ogre.
That motherfucker.
I had to take 5 feats and be a half ogre to make it work, but it's an unbeatable combination. If I just keep hopping back 5 feet and off a cliff.
I'm glad we get the same references. It makes describing things so much easier. Actually, what I'd argue the dumbest weapon is any time that somebody uses a standard guitar as a weapon.
What if it's not a standard... Actually, wait. Let me rephrase that. What if it's not a melee weapon?
I mean... Yeah. Let's talk Noise Marines. I'm...
It's actually not just Noise Marines. You remember that shitty RP character I told you about that I had that one time that was the portal guy?
Oh, no.
Yeah, he also had a guitar and would use it as a sonic weapon. This was before I knew Noise Marines were a thing.
And if you knew Noise Marines were a thing, you would have made him just metal as fuck.
Oh yeah. Straight Slash worshiper.
But can we just agree that El Kabong had the worst choice of weapons in any?
A Tommy gun? What are you talking about?
El Kabong, the old Hanna-Barbera character.
Al Capone? What?
El Kabong.
Al Capone.
God damn it.
I'm sorry, I don't know who El Kabong is. It was not a reference I got.
God damn it, I'm sending you a link. Hold on. He was an anthropomorphic horse in a Hanna-Barbera cartoon from the 70s. You know, his alter ego was Quick Draw McGraw.
Oh, I will mention, however, that, like, realistically speaking, yes, a guitar makes a very shitty weapon. It's like an axe, but with none of the axe's strong points.
I mean, all it is a worse club.
It is a worse club. Unless it has the capability to awaken people's NO fields or something.
Haha, yes.
You know what? I'm going to come out and say it. It's a controversial opinion, but it is an opinion I have. Fooly Cooly Progressive was good.
I haven't seen it yet.
I am the only person I know who is of this opinion. But I think it was good.
I mean, I'm just a fan of anything the Pillows lend their music to. Let's see. What are some other fucking terrible weapons?
Fucking
melee weapons.
Terrible melee weapons.
I mean, we could dive into just the fucking, I don't know, wouldn't say obscene, but just dive into fucking, goddamn it, what's the series called? It's not GTA, but the other one that was irreverent.
Saints Row?
That's it. Swinging around a giant fuck-off dildo.
I mean, I think that weapon. I think that weapon is more about the humiliation of the thing. Look, some weapons do psychological damage. All right.
Like being slapped with a fish?
For example.
I'd say brooms were a terrible weapon, but I've been hit with a broom before. It hurts.
That doesn't make it a good weapon, though.
Fair.
But see, all the things we're naming are things that are not supposed to be weapons. So
we're getting off topic.
Well, it's not even that. It's that, yes, the worst weapon is an improvised weapon. Are you surprised by this?
No, because the amount of penalties you take to utilize them in any kind of system is ridiculous.
Unless you take, like, feats. I once had a... or no, I'm sorry, that wasn't my character. But I once had in my party a monk who had fully specialized into weapon proficiency barstool.
I'm sorry, what?
You heard me.
I did, but weapon proficiency barstool.
Yes, barstool. I'm sorry, it wasn't a monk, it was a fighter. This fighter had weapon specialization barstool.
So he was useless in anything but the tavern.
Correct. However, the one time we did get into a tavern brawl, you need only guess who won. It was the guy who got plus $2 rolls when wielding a bar stool.
My God. Oh dear God, that's a thing. That's a thing that existed. Shall we divert?
Divert how?
We've talked an awful lot about melee weapons. Can we talk about some projectile weapons by chance? Because I have a couple that come up.
Okay. I don't know what you're... There's less opportunity for hilarity with that, but if you've got something, dude, let me know.
So when I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking about interesting gun variants and interesting weapon variants that you can find in various settings.
Sure.
I mean, I think at this point we could consider a bolter interesting, but not.
I mean, it's fairly standard. It's just a machine gun rocket launcher.
Yeah, I mean, technically we have something akin to that today. It's just fires grenades instead of rockets.
Right.
But one of my favorite franchises in BattleTech universe.
Truly, BattleTech is the new 40K.
BattleTech, it's got your standards. It's got your short-range missiles, your long-range missiles, your medium-range missiles, your lasers of varying sizes and wavelengths, your machine guns, your autocannons mounted on a mech. Then you get into some of the really, really fun shit. And there's three that stand out in my mind. The Long Tom artillery piece, the particle projectile cannon, and the Gauss rifle.
Gauss rifle.
Uh-huh.
Seems good. I mean, this sounds like a railgun.
I mean, that's what it is. It is a railgun, but it's mounted on a, walking war machine.
Yeah.
And they come in different sizes. And you can, in theory, you can equip, and most heavy mechs, 2 of them, and they can take the head off another mech.
Right.
From about a mile away.
Sure. I mean, it's always nice to have artillery. We talked about artillery for, gosh, ages.
I mean, yeah, but it's. I don't know. I like the Gauss rifle. I didn't use it much because most of my variants ended up being some variation of pulse lasers and other things, just for the sake of ammunition. But
I like to spam missiles.
Spamming missiles is fun. It is absolutely hilarious to put just as many missiles as you can into a catapult and just fire them all.
That's what I did in MechWarrior Online.
Uh-huh. Then you have the particle projectile cannons, the PPCs. I'm not 100% sure because I've been drinking and I don't think I can look it up at the moment. Essentially, it functions similar to a railgun, and probably closer to a Tau plasma rifle, or plasma guns in general from 40K, where it has supercharged particles that it projects in an array, and just you're shooting lightning across the battlefield to things that fucks up their interface.
Sure.
Also, you can mount a ridiculous amount of these on a mech. You can mount 2 or 3 or maybe 4 in some of the bigger models. Maybe 5 if you're feeling ridiculous. It tends to make medium and light mechs go pop.
You know what, though? When you stop and think about it, there is really only one projectile weapon that truly warrants being discussed in this discussion.
Oh?
Yep. And it is... It is the shock attack gun.
Yeah, I think the shock attack gun could, theoretically just be considered the 40K variant of a relativistic kill vehicle.
Because, you see, what the shock attack gun does is it teleports its ammunition, which is usually a goblin, into the target.
And that's if everything works out correctly.
Right, that's your best case scenario. Other things it does is explode. Or randomly teleport the user instead.
Which is hilarious when you consider that the user is usually an orc weird boy or mech boy. And, imagine them appearing inside something the size of a...
But yes, it's one of the better offensive uses of teleportation. Just teleport a goblin into the opponent. It'll be fine.
Because you obviously don't care about the goblins. Who gives a fuck about goblins?
Goblins don't care about goblins.
It's amazing.
You can alternatively just teleport, the opponent somewhere. That's fine too.
Can we talk about relativistic kill weapons?
We can. We can. But first, you should probably name one from a fiction.
I've got one. It's not the best example of one, but it's one that essentially sums up what the fuck it does, even though it does it wrong in the actual scene. And you're gonna hate me for it, Brandon, so I apologize in advance. In The Last Jedi.
I do not hate you for this.
So if anybody who's seen The Last Jedi can remember back to a specific point where a starship is
without a doubt the best scene in that movie.
Is turned towards the enemy Star Destroyer. I believe it was a Corellian blockade runner. Yep. Was what they were using. Was I right?
I believe so.
So what they did is they turned this blockade runner around, which I guess in nautical terms might be no more than a frigate. I mean, it's not big, but it's got some guns.
I think that probably qualified as a cruiser.
I think what it was going up against was a cruiser, because I think if you look at the Super Star Destroyers as battleships...
No, that thing was a dreadnought.
That was a dreadnought?
It was Snoke's, gigantic fucking Super Star Destroyer Plus, or whatever.
I only watched the movie once, and that was enough for me.
I watched that movie 3 times, because I thought it was actually pretty good.
It wasn't terrible, but I just... Anyway.
This is why the internet's going to kill me, because that movie was pretty good.
Anyway, so what they do is, if you haven't seen the scene, is they set in the hyperdrive, which shouldn't necessarily work due to everything you have to work in, but you can make it work by disabling all the safeties, and then they set it for hyperspeed, so light speed or an appreciable fraction of light speed, and just have it collide with the pursuing vessel. And what happens when you take anything,
literally anything, any object,
it does not have to be the size of a cruiser. It could be, the size of a Buick.
It could be the size of a baseball if it was going fast enough.
If you take any object and accelerate it to an appreciable percentage of light speed, it gives zero fucks about anything in its way. Because Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest sumbitch in space.
That is a true fact. That is probably the truest fact in all of Mass Effect.
So what happens when you do this and you turn it towards something that's, much larger than what you're projecting towards it, it tends to make things go boom, because if you don't have to know a lot about physics. I don't know a lot about physics, but I understand the concept that when you take a mass and accelerate it to a certain degree, you end up with force. When you accelerate that mass to, a percentage of light speed, not even light speed. Just
because that's not actually possible.
Just like 0.0001% of light speed. Depending on the mass of the object, it's going to absolutely fuck up whatever it hits.
Yeah, it's going to fuck up whatever it hits in ways physics barely understands.
Which is why my next group of weapons for my genius characters are just going to be miniaturized relativistic kill weapons.
I mean, you have the ability to do that.
I'm going to do that thing.
I wish you wouldn't. Oh, talk about choosing the right weapon for a character.
That would be the appropriate weapon for Chuck, for at least until we discover something more entertaining.
Until we discover something more destructive.
Which I'm not sure you can, because I'm not sure I can because relativistic kill weapons
are pretty destructive.
I mean, and on a lighter scale, and I'm not talking lighter scale in terms of, oh yeah, any gun or bow is accelerating something to a percentage of light speed. No, it's not an appreciable percentage of light speed enough to do damage to this thing. The concept of the, I believe it was the second G.I. Joe live action movie? With the tungsten rods in orbit, and you just release them.
Did we just reference the live action... The live action G.I. Joe movie? We just referenced that.
The movie's terrible, but the scene is hilarious. You release a large enough object into the atmosphere from orbit, and it will just, quote-unquote, cleanly decimate us.
Yeah, that's a thing that happens, alright, because it's going real fast, and when things go real fast, they blow stuff up.
What are some other just absolutely hilarious projectile weapons? Cyclonic torpedoes?
So the problem with cyclonic torpedoes is that they don't really have a standard description. Like, it's either just a really big nuke, or it's some kind of fusion bomb that has a self-sustaining fire vortex or something. Which, thematically works out pretty well because, well, if a cyclonic torpedo is getting fired at something, then that thing needs to die. And will.
We could go with glassing a planet. No, glassing the planet is a little passé considering the fact we've covered arcade.
Right. I think that
things that actually existed. The Davy Crockett.
Oh my god, why did that exist? You ever notice that, we're kind of fucking insane?
I mean, the human race is fully capable of destroying itself multiple times over.
But you know what we need? You know what we need, guys? We need a nuke you can just carry around.
And we're not talking about just a nuke you carry around in a suitcase bomb. No, we want a way to launch it within the not even the minimum safe distance. You use this fucking thing, you're going to suffer radiation poisoning and die.
Unless you're the boss, I guess.
Fair.
But yeah, that's a thing that actually existed. You know what? I think that weapon actually serves thematically to round up the entirety of the Cold War. It all everything that happened in the Cold War pretty much contained within the idea of the Davy Crockett.
Let's give the grunt soldiers a way to launch nukes at the enemy.
Yeah. Let's not do that. Let's not ever do that.
I mean, it lives on in the form of the Fat Man.
I thought Fat Man was one of the nukes we dropped on Japan.
Fallout.
Oh, Fallout. Right.
I mean, granted, the Davy Crockett, from what I remember, it was slightly larger, kind of a small field artillery piece, and not shoulder mounted at all.
According to Metal Gear Solid 3, it was shoulder mounted.
Do you trust everything Metal Gear Solid 3 shows you?
Yes, literally all of it.
I mean, you do have a shrine to Kojima somewhere, I bet.
A shrine to Kojima?
Multiple.
Hideo Kojima is a saint.
Not arguing here.
You know what I want to see characters use more often?
What's that?
I want to see more characters use a mace.
Absolutely.
You never see maces. Everyone's got a sword. Like, whatever happened to just a good, honest clubbing until your opponent's brain seeps out?
I mean, they appear in pretty much everything. Except for, most things that have a premise on, swords. I mean, Sauron had a mace.
That is true. Why did only Sauron have a mace? Why are you trying to fight the guy that is like 90% armor with a sword?
I mean, the Witch King had a Morning Star.
Yes. So in other words, the only people who have a pragmatic understanding of the value of a good heavy object to bludgeon someone with are the bad guys.
I mean, thematically speaking, the bad guys are the only ones who are going to want to leave around that much of a mess and cause that much pain and misery. The good guys, they have to kill.
Okay, I'm going to throw it out there. Bludgeoning someone until their brain seeps out is a fairly clean way to kill them.
Yes, but it doesn't look clean to the little kiddies. Because remember, all movies nowadays are made for...
It literally does. Because that's why medieval warrior priests used maces, because they didn't want to shed because they were not allowed to shed blood. Say they didn't shed blood, they shed brain.
Yeah, this is true. And not wolves. I'm sorry, I was confusing my priests of Sigmar tend to use maces quite a bit.
Yeah, they do. But I'm talking about freeform roleplay here. That's where I want to see more maces.
Oh, true. I mean, also, you had that weird, fucked up variant of a Tonfa mace in Force Awakens.
Yeah, what the shit was that weapon? It was really... it didn't look like it would be unusable. It looked fine as a weapon, but, I have never seen anything like that.
I'm guessing whoever designed that weapon main Talim in Soul Calibur.
Or he just wanted to watch it spin.
Traitor!
TR-8R, the hero Gotham deserves.
Yes. What are some other examples of maces? Maces are fun.
Maces are fun.
Want to say I've seen a mace somewhere. Oh, yeah. In Shadow of War, one of the bosses you fight wields a mace to just bash people around with.
Is it Sauron?
It's the Hammer of Sauron.
Is it literally the Hammer of Sauron, like from the movie?
No, that's the voice of Sauron. He was not featured in the game because I'm assuming. Because at this point, if you're going to put orcs in a game, you know what an orc's going to look like. They've kind of reached the what's the word?
The cultural zeitgeist is aware of what an orc is.
Cultural zeitgeist is aware of what an orc is, so you can put an orc in anything, and you know what an orc is going to look like. Pending, cybernetic enhancements, because 40k is hard. Where's someone else I saw on Mace recently? We're on Maces now, so welcome to the Mace Hour. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. Oh, you know what another stupid fucking weapon is?
What's that?
Chakrams that are used like hula hoops.
You're gonna have to...
So that only comes up because I've been playing a lot of MTG recently, and some of the cards I use have some of those in them because I'm a filthy Rakdos main.
Right.
There's a character, I can't remember her name. She appeared in Soul Calibur 4. And
I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I don't remember her name, though.
Let's use a hula hoop as a weapon.
It is a bladed hula hoop.
Okay, but that just brings about all kinds of other, unpleasant possibilities.
Yeah, I am definitely not convinced. Oh, Tira. Tira is her name, and I am not at all convinced by that weapon.
I mean, I guess we can reach the point now where we should talk about weapons that should never be used, ever.
I mean, I think we've already kind of done that.
A bit, yeah. Where can we go from here?
I'm not sure.
We've covered interesting melee. We've covered interesting, projectile.
What can we discuss? Yes, Valdo is weirder, but his weapons are just claws, so it's not that weird.
I just accept the canon that Valdo is just David Bowie and Soul Calibur.
I can't. David Bowie is much too cool to be that guy. That's not okay.
The Katars are not his weapon. His groin is. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I think I don't have anything else. Do you?
I'm drawing a bit of a blank, yeah.
Okay, in that case,
what about Yoshimitsu?
That's a katana.
Uh-huh. On the katana.
Oh my god, I hate fucking katanas. Go ahead.
So by and large, when you come down to it, most nerds and geeks, when they start, growing into the fact that they start appreciating things, katanas are something they always latch onto as being the ultimate uber weapon.
For some reason, I think it's anime related.
I mean, absolutely, it's anime related. Doesn't make it any better.
No. Okay, so I am not going to argue that the katana is just a shit weapon. It's not. It's not just a shit weapon. It is good at the thing it was designed to do. The thing that it was designed to do is cutting down unarmored peasants.
Or, people wearing lamellar armor, which, there are other ways around that. Or, in which you look at start looking at the Renaissance, you start having, arming swords and, rapiers and stuff coming about. I mean, they're not going to do much terrible amount against armor. They're going to be great against somebody who's unarmored. I'm not going to argue that katanas don't look cool. There are some katanas that are beautiful, beautiful things.
However, I'm just going to point out very quickly, by basically posting an image link, this is a good one. I'm just going to point out, if you follow that link, that the Germans are better at making a katana than the Japanese were. That is how you make a two-handed curved sword right there. And that is a weapon I have never seen a fictional character use, not once.
What's its designation?
That is a Kriegmesser.
A Kriegmesser? Wait. I could have sworn there was somebody kicking around the keep who used a Kriegmesser.
There might have been. Never met him.
Like, was it Wolf? Did Wolf use a Kriegmesser?
I don't know, dude.
Charlotte, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that correctly. Somebody from Quigley had one. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that roleplay died before it ever began.
I still have that character kicking around. Oh yes, throwing weapons.
Throwing weapons are always like shown to be way more effective than they actually are.
I mean, yeah. You go with the Asian tradition with the chakrams, or kunai and shuriken.
Right, all weapons that were traditionally dipped in poison because they were not very effective.
I suppose you have the black egg, which is also just poison.
Yeah.
And then you start going, westward, and you have, throwing axes, which...
I mean, throwing axes aren't ineffective, it's just,
they're not something to build a character around.
I mean, by all means, have a character that occasionally throws the hatchet they're carrying around. That's fine, but that's the thing. You don't consider a throwing axe as having been designed to have been thrown. It's just like a guy had an axe in his hand and decided to throw it at you.
Yeah, kinda. I want to say at some point I saw something somewhere about, you would throw the axe not into the approaching enemy, but low so it would bounce and hit their legs and so on and so on.
That's a thing you could do, yeah. I'm just saying that you could make a balanced throwing axe, but there's no reason to do it. Actually, no, that's not true. There is one reason to do it.
to take part in throwing axe competitions?
Also that, but no, mainly, okay. In old Norway, I think, I want to say Norway, a man, let's say, a man was considered to own all of the land he could hit with an axe from his door.
So you make an effective axe that can be used for throwing. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so you'd get a special throwing axe that was a little bit lighter and a little better balanced, so you could throw it as far as humanly possible. And, you owned all the land you could hit. So if you threw it way the fuck out there, then you owned all the land between you and where the axe landed.
And Phoebe, I do agree. Kunai, not a thing. However, they've also entered the internet zeitgeist as a thing that existed, so they have to be considered with any conversation concerning throwing weapons. They're horribly weighted, but they are, at least in terms of how anime would portray them. Would you consider the atlatl and that spear using an atlatl? Would you consider that a throwing weapon?
It's somewhere between a throwing weapon and a projectile, really. Atlatls are super cool.
They're badass. And I mean, and once you throw it, you can still kind of use the thrower as a club in some situations.
Yeah.
Makuatl? Is that just a variation of atlatl? What was the name of the fucking weird, not the kind of pseudo swords with the, kind of look like cricket bats with obsidian, laid into the edges?
Oh, those Maori swords. Yeah, those are cool.
Or Aztec swords. Those are fucking badass. And just highly destructive considering nobody wore armor, so you're just fucking up everyone.
Yeah, a lot of things are really effective when no one's wearing armor. Oh, that's what a Makuatl is. Okay.
Ah, yes. Oh, going back to...
Oh, that's something I should do one day.
Make a character based around a Makuatl?
No. Run a D&D session in the Stone Age.
Sold. I'll participate. But let's go back to your Roman legions for a second, and just a strange, not so much a strange, but an interesting little weapon, throwing weapon.
Just a javelin, just like a throwing spear?
Well, yeah, but the premise behind the ones with the extended metal shaft, that when you throw them, they couldn't be thrown.
Yeah, like it's a dedicated throwing spear, which, that works just fine if you don't have if you don't have access to good bows, which they did not.
At least not outside their auxiliary.
Right, and it's also, well, throwing weapons become twice as effective when literally every person in the Legion has one or two.
And just throw them in mass at the howling barbarian horde.
Exactly, it's pretty effective. Let's say. Pretty effective.
I think we're running out of steam here, and I don't...
It's okay. It's okay to be running out of steam. We have been talking about this for over 2 hours. Throwing weapons, in general, not great. Throwing weapons en masse, pretty great.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Are we talking Flintstones D&D? That would be spoilerific, so I'm not going to tell you.
We're going to make a genius now who's just working on the whole Lemurian aspect of everything was fine during the Stone Age.
Everything was fine during the Stone Age. We ruined everything with all this science that I do.
Just like a genius that's almost Walking Man. Oh, it's terrible. I have to make this thing now.
Oh, that's a horrible idea. Don't do that. Okay, I think we are. I think we are actually out of steam now.
Yeah, I've got nothing.
That's okay. This has been an episode. This has been an episode of a show. I think it's been a good episode of a show.
I had fun.
Indeed. So, as always, I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and, well, we already know what our thing's going to be next time, right?
Oh yeah, who would win?
Yeah, who wins in a fight. So, if you're interested in the program at all, and you want to send in your challenges, let's say, then you can hit me at Padre Luminadre on Twitter or on my Discord or any other way you have of getting a hold of me with your creepy internet powers.
Same here. You can reach me at DD. I'm assuming it's DDK Madcat on Discord. I'm confused at this point. Maybe that failed my third or fourth, but it's definitely DDK Madcat on Twitter.
Wait, what are we waiting for? I'm waiting with bated breath. Oh no, there are no rules here. If I think it's good, we're going to talk about it.
We're essentially just going to set up a debate of some sort and just kind of see how long it takes for one of us to concede.
It's too late. I've already conceded. You're too late, Mickey.
Ah, such a fun game. I loved it. It was glorious. Am I sensing some distrust from Kingdom Hearts?
Look, the entire concept of that game was pretty dumb, but then Kingdom Hearts 3 made it even dumber.
Oh my god. I think you alienated any viewers I may have possibly brought to this.
I'm sorry, Kingdom Hearts is just not great.
Well, on that bombshell.
Oh man, we should start ending on bombshells all the time. On that bombshell, it is time to end. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Hopefully, between me liking The Last Jedi and Fooly Cooly Progressive and not liking Kingdom Hearts 3, I have alienated everyone in this channel, and none of you will ever come back.
Don't worry, folks. You can still come back from me. I'll fight him to the death? Death. Or alcohol poisoning, whichever comes first.
Or death by alcohol poisoning.
So, just anytime I hang out with you.
Correct. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Have a great night. And
Goodbye.
we're out of now. Playing us out.